What's going on, everybody? Doc, Average Gamer Guys, back yet again in another episode of Let's Talk Tarkov. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about the community podcast, some interesting things that we heard from Nikita and the gang as they went through that, as well as just kind of continue to check in on the status of Tarkov and talk about the things that we're enjoying and the things that may be also a little frustrating and anything in between. So, big topics today that I want to cover is going to be global limits. I also want to talk about this status of Perma-Death that was discussed, as well as the future of the game, and just kind of rehash some things that we already know, as well as some things that were discussed that I think are good clarifiers for the community. So, without further ado, let's jump in. Let's talk Tarkov. All right, so I don't really know where to start with this one. If you're not familiar, probably a good starting place is actually that we go and take a listen and a look at the community podcast. This went up by the time this post is probably a day or 2 days ago, and I think it was really good. They had some of the community members on there, some familiar faces if you're a fan of the Tarkov community and the scene, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, and the like. And Nikita obviously jumped on, and they spent some time just kind of chatting generally about the game. There were quite a few like major standout things, things that maybe we hadn't heard before or that were being planned, or were that at least in the discussion, and then a lot that's already been relatively confirmed. I'm going to hit some of the highlights of stuff that we know already, because I think it's just good to rehash those, but more importantly, you've probably heard it before or seen it in another spot or a different podcast, so we can just cover it really quickly. And if you're not, we can certainly chat in the comments down below if you are interested in some more information or maybe have not heard it yet. So, Streets of Tarkov. It's on its way. They cut it into a bunch of pieces is what they talked about, and the vast majority of the team is hard at work to be able to deliver that location. If you're not familiar, that is the last location that is going to be released before the full release of the game. I think that's important. I would fully expect it's going to take still a while. But they have chopped it up and they plan to release it in those sections. Basically, what Nikita talked about is that every patch, once it's released, every patch after that is going to add some things on. Some extra streets, some extra buildings, some extra points of interest, and it's going to work through that. He also said, interestingly enough, that they want Streets of Tarkov to be the map that everybody wants to play and forgets about all the other ones, which I thought was really cool and really interesting, but also kind of gives you the size and scale of how big this thing is going to be. So I thought that was really cool. They spent some time talking a little bit about Lighthouse, that there's going to be additional traders in there. There was some speculation around the fact that Santa during the event was kind of a test of what the trader is going to be. And Nikita basically said no. He said that was an NPC, things that they've thought about doing with scavs and kind of maybe testing that feature out, but that is not essentially how the in-game trader is going to work, and be excited for it because it's going to be pretty cool. They also talked about the bosses and some of the additional patch. He wanted to really clarify, and this is Nikita, wanted to really clarify that essentially Lighthouse is not going to get expanded outside of the inclusion, obviously, of the Lighthouse in future patches. It's basically where it is right now. They've also considered or talked about maybe further expanding other maps, but again, the big focus is on streets, which is pretty much where it needs to be. So I'm really looking forward to seeing like Lighthouse in its entirety. They also talked about how they had to tone down some scavs and do some other things with Lighthouse to boost the performance up. And that is where a big portion of the focus for Lighthouse is as well, is continuing to work on and essentially get it to a spot where it can be playable. I don't want to say that, where the frames can be better and it's optimized better in order to handle the load. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know that's been the biggest struggle. I think with some of the recent patches, it's been okay. But I think there's still more work to be done. I also talked a little bit about some transitions with Unity and some of the problems they had, some patches they rolled out. Sound, they're very aware of some of the issues with the sound, and that's actually, or not Unity, that's on that side of the house and not necessarily within Tarkov. So they talked a little bit about that, kind of the progression. Last big thing that I think is important that we've all generally known is that basically arena mode for those of us that have Edge of Darkness is going to come included. If you don't own Edge of Darkness and just own Tarkov, you are going to have to purchase that separately. It's also going to be a completely separate purchasable piece of the game for anyone that doesn't have Tarkov at all. And they said that that's in the works. Very interesting, going to be a lot of fun. Definitely take a lot of the stress out of what Tarkov brings, and be probably a little bit more catered to other styles of games, which I think is good. He also said it was going to be very cheap, so while I said you're probably going to have to pay for it, just realize that he said it was going to be very cheap, and they want to make it pretty accessible, kind of like a DLC, which I think is pretty cool. In addition to that, they talked a little bit about like the future of the game, and this kind of takes us into some of our bigger topics, but they talked about the future of the game and what like full release is going to look like. Basically right now, as it is planned, as I understand it, there's essentially going to be like two characters. There's going to essentially be a character that wipes, and a character that you have that does not wipe, so that you can get all the progression on. Basically what Nikita talked about is that the community is not necessarily split, but there's a lot of folks that really like the wipes. I'm in that boat. I like wiping, I like doing the quests, I like having other things to keep me kind of engaged. And then he said there's another side of the house that basically doesn't like that. They want to level their character up, they want to be able to grind. I think that's really beneficial for those folks that maybe can't play a ton. You can really focus on one character, and you can take a long time to be able to kind of develop that character out. Whereas if you kind of like the other side of the play style, you can certainly put your time into that, and then maybe when that gets boring, you can shift over to your permanent character. So I thought that was pretty cool. Nikita then brought up the idea of basically permadeath, and what he talked about was having situations in the game and locations that basically have some type of radiation, where there's a huge amount of reward, but also a huge amount of risk. And if you don't play it smart, and you purposely mess around in those areas, that basically your character could get a lethal dose of radiation that you can't fix, and therefore then would basically die, and you would have to reset your account in order to get that character back. There's a lot of discussion around that. The one kind of misnomer that I think is out there a little bit is that this is not currently a planned feature. They have talked about it, they have probably drawn it up. Obviously Nikita is not one to like throw a feature out that they haven't at least spent some time discussing. But what I got from the discussion was basically like, we have thought about doing something like this, and something like this in the future may come. He also talked about how if you were really smart with it, basically that you could avoid that, right? You could go into those areas with certain special types of equipment. He talked about like a military grade gas mask, for instance, and that if you got out in the requisite amount of time or did the right things, that you could get out and then recover from it without that permadeath solution. So I think there's a lot to be fleshed out there. I think there's a lot of hype around that because it was like a wow moment for a lot of folks. What I heard from the conversation was, again, like, we thought about this. This is something that we may implement in the future at some point. A lot of the podcast members talked about, well, like, you could do that in extracts, basically, to avoid extract campers. Yes, true. However, I don't think that was the intent. They also then kind of rolled that a little bit into like the further progression of the game and kind of the open world mentality of going from one map. Labs is the typical one that's brought up, is where you go into streets, run your raid, and then find a secret entrance into labs. And then that would then queue you into a labs, essentially raid, where then you would go through that and you would have to then extract, but you wouldn't extract out directly from labs. You would extract back out into maybe, say, another map, like Shoreline, for instance, and then would have to survive that raid, and then you could extract fully or continue to extract until you actually got to an exit for the area. There's a lot to be fleshed out there. That's kind of like a big open world concept that they've talked about. I think Nikita seems very excited about that, but there's obviously a lot of things that have to be fleshed out there. They talked about, like, would in-raid timers still be a thing? Which he said no, but you could still be pulled into servers where people are playing that, but also pulled into servers simultaneously that are people are just playing and they're just doing the traditional in and out raids. I just feel like that's a totally different dynamic. He talked about being able to camp those extracts or infills, if you will. It was a lot of discussion. So what I get from that is there's still a ton of ideas. There's still a ton of ideas on how the game, especially at release, is going to look. And I'm excited for that. I also think, again, that during these podcasts, they like to talk about things that have come up before, and we'll just have to kind of wait to see what actually comes to fruition. I like the idea of going back a little bit to Perma-Death, especially for some like really high valuable areas. And that's what he talked about. He said that if you were to go into those areas, that you could get some like really special gear. But again, the risk is the risk worth the reward. I think that would also be interesting if you think about the application of that after release between your wipeable character and your permanent character. You may not want to do that with your permanent character, right? Because you don't want to start all over. But a wipeable character, near the end, you may be willing to go do that. You may be willing to go risk your level 45 character that you've grinded up and got all of the traders with. And maybe you know when the wipe cycle is going to be in, it's a month out, and you don't mind if that character ends up dying. Well, maybe you then go risk going into those special areas, getting some super cool gear. And if you end up dying, hey, it's only a couple of weeks. I'll go play on basically my main PMC that doesn't wipe. I think this is really interesting. They also talked a lot, again, a lot of these topics kind of segued one into another. They also spent a lot of time talking about how Wipe 1212 has gone really well. They've expanded their team, which is why a lot of the things are moving a lot faster. Things like bug fixes, patches are coming out, server maintenance, all that kind of stuff seems like it's generally moving faster. And I can say that having played this game for a couple of years now at this point, that I would definitely agree to that. But they also Nikita talked about how just this wipe has been really good for them to figure out how to really kind of flesh out and keep that earlier wipe, mid-wipe feel going longer. He also talked about skills progression a little bit, says he likes where it is, but they still do need to do some tweaks. They actually plan to do probably some nerfs to quite a few skills, which it is what it is. We'll see what those are. I've talked about skills progression as well, and how I think it can probably use a little bit of work, especially things like weapon skills. Weapon skills to me, because my opinion, doesn't add a huge benefit. I think there's definitely some tweaking with the categories of weapons and how those need to be leveled up, how points are applied, how you get from level to level. SR25 is one I brought up in stream the other day, just because I use it a ton. I use it an absolute ton, and I don't think I'm even halfway through. Well, let's check. I don't even think I'm halfway through the first level on the SR25, and I use it constantly. I want to look now because I don't want to speak incorrectly. Yeah, 284 points out of 1,000. I can tell you I've killed a lot of people with this gun. I've killed a lot of scavs. I use it constantly. I use it basically on Shoreline Lighthouse. I use it on a ton of maps, reserve, anywhere where I can get some range and actually do some shooting. And I'm sitting here. Now, I've used the Scar a decent amount, a couple of different versions of it, but you can see that even with that, because this is a fully automatic weapon, it gets some bonuses and some benefits from basically how these skills are calculated. So I do think there's a thing to take a look at. He also talked about how like strength and endurance, people are always going to cheese these things. So finding a nice balance between how to do that, how to make it feel fair without those things being too overpowered while still allowing people to reach the max is a very fine balance. And I thought that was a good discussion. One other huge topic that got brought up that you've probably see some other posts and tweets and different things about is global limits. They then spun that off into talking about traders and how like there are going to be stored progression elements at some points where you will have to make a choice. And some traders then may not become available to you. You may hurt their reputation too bad or make a choice that completely basically cuts them off from being used to you. And it was an interesting discussion around global limits. But basically what he talked about was they're here to stay. They're basically not going to change them. They also have a system or are working on a system to make those things dynamic. So there are certain things where they want things to feel scarce. We saw this in 12.11 and the wipe with that when they were doing the events for like fuel and food and dehydration and water and certain other types of things. Those were more in-game events. This, they want to have a more dynamic system that changes this constantly, and it's constantly revolving around it and changing it. He did also say that they are going to continue to tweak some of the total global limit values and kind of modify those. But again, want to have a system that basically just works on its own to be able to provide scarcity or provide the opportunity to get things. I think personally with this, I understand that at some point, like, traders are going to have evolved. We're going to be doing different things with traders. In-game traders, I think, are going to be really interesting. So again, you're going to have to put out a different level of risk versus reward for that. I am a fan of how they've kind of modified the system a little bit with locking things behind quests and quest progression. Now, I know everybody's not a fan of that because some people just want to get in the game and you just want to play. But I think that's an interesting way, especially for some of the higher tier things, to make some levels of requirements. I just think it needs to continue to be tweaked a little bit. I do feel like if you progress to a certain point, especially if something is locked behind a trader at a certain level, and then also locked behind a quest, that doing that work to get to that point should ensure, at least to some level of degree, that you can buy it. And what I would be in favor of is, again, continuing to tweak maybe the amounts that you can buy, as well as the global limits, as well as there's also other opportunities at some point to find those things. Whether that's putting them in a tough position or spot, having to have you kill raiders or bosses for the ammo, there's got to be a way, I feel like, at some points to earn those things outside of maybe buying them. So global limits, they're here to stay. They're going to continue to change and get tweaked. That's the important message from the conversation and from the podcast. And I think we just need to kind of hold our reservations and realize that, again, that's being tailored to ensure this kind of mid-game aspect of where we're at right now. And everybody, if you play 12.11 remembers how bad BP ammo was and the mutant and everybody running it. You're still seeing it, but I definitely think you're seeing a bigger variety of weapons at this point, outside of the ump, because it's clearly the best. I just think they have to continue to find a way to tweak these things. And scarcity of some of that stuff is a way for them to dynamically change the meta, right? And that sucks if you really start to enjoy and have success with a certain type of weapon, or I would say even like weapon class where you're using a similar type of ammo. But we've got to recognize that that is a part of this, and Tarkov is intended to be hard. It's also intended to, I feel like, make you kind of stress different things, and stressing different builds, different armors, different guns is one thing that they're going to continue to do, and they're going to continue to find ways to be able to do that. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on that, the permadeath situation, kind of the future state of the game, and how your wipe is going. I think my only gripe at this point continues to be I want to see a fix. I do want to see a fix or continued kind of tweaking and adjusting to daily and weekly tasks. And here's what I'm talking about. I literally, outside of my find and transfer thing, have 3 tasks for labs. My weekly is to revive 17 times, which isn't the craziest amount, but when you consider how hard and how expensive this quest is going to be, certainly provides some value. And then literally my 2 dailies, which I just picked up, are more survives and eliminations of PMCs on the map with a certain type of shot. Very hard. This is very difficult because I don't use the KS-23. So if you do, this is very easy for you. But I don't. And even this, Hangar Gate has not been very reliable as far as an extract location, at least in my recent couple of weeks of playing, and not as much as it used to be. So I'd like to see some continuation of this. I'd like to almost also see like a reroll system, or even maybe you could pay. I would love to be able to pay this trader maybe a certain amount of money, or maybe swap a barter item or something, throw something at him, or maybe I can re-roll a certain portion of this, maybe the location, maybe the type of shot that I have to do it with, or maybe who I have to do it against. Like, this would be better if this was against rogues, or not rogues, raiders, for instance, in labs would be an interesting thing. So I've liked this system. I think it's been great. It's like soul crushing, because I personally feel like this system is what helps players that don't play this game constantly all the time. And I play it a lot, trust me. I feel like this is what is going to help me get to 62 and get to Kappa. I really do. I seriously believe that. I seriously believe if you're trying to make a push, especially once you hit above level, whatever it is, 45, and start getting the better rewards, 25, 26K for doing a few things right here. Each of these, I mean, we're talking 26 there, 26 there, and 30 here. That is a huge amount of experience for essentially doing quote unquote 3 things, right? And especially your find and transfers. If you have these things, a lot of times they're relatively easy. Get your 26K, get your easy experience. So just continue to tweak this. I also am doing really well as far as quest completion is concerned, except for Lighthouse, because I can't seem to find, well, I'll find the bears eventually. I just can't seem to find scavs along the road. And a few of these things I would really just like. Same thing with this. There has to be some non-player scavs to drive this, or I feel like these tasks are going to be very, very difficult, especially now, as kind of not like the allure of Lighthouse is worn off, but definitely people are moving through and playing different things. Or again, scavs. If you're doing your player scav, you probably have a decent idea, if you get a good gun, of how to go in and get some raider loot with very little risk. So why would you not go do that instead of running over to the chateau, you know? So some work on that would be great. Other than that, I'm enjoying it, having fun. Hopefully you are too. I really do. Hopefully you're going good. Hopefully you're getting what you like to get done, and hopefully everything is working for you. Really quick last kind of update announcement is solar panels is fixed. Now I know probably not a ton of people are going to end up getting this. It is extremely expensive. I am a big fan of trying to get my hideout upgraded all the way, and I am 78 hours away from the final upgrade of the Bitcoin farm, and then I need 23 more of these beautiful graphics cards because I'm sitting on 2. All that being said, this is fixed now, where it's not burning additional fuel, and it is giving you the bonus whether you're online or offline. And this is, it is a good upgrade, especially if you feel like you know how to grind money. It essentially is just a time saver, in my opinion, and ensures that you can just load this thing up once in a while and just leave your generator run, and honestly constantly be getting things, which is really nice. So if you care about hideout progression and being able to do that, just know in the recent patch, solar power is fixed. So there was another patch with a whole bunch of other background type bug fixes and items and issues and things like that. If I remember, I'll link it down below, but we just continue to see some progress with the game, and very excited. I'm very excited. Again, we should be seeing hopefully some stuff for Lighthouse, at least the bosses, coming relatively soon, which would be pretty cool. They also talked, Nikita, last thing I just want to highlight, talked about there are going to be some other features at release that they are working on that are not going to be in the game prior to full release. And I know that's quite a ways down the line, but I think that's pretty cool. So this game is going to continue to dynamically change, hopefully for the better, and hopefully make for a better player experience. And I'm very much looking forward to that. So we're at about 24 minutes at this point, and I think it's a good spot to wrap it up. Hopefully this was a good talking Tarkov with you and for you if you're not super up to date. I got to put the quick plug in here: like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for all the support on the channel with all the series. If you're not familiar, maybe this is one of the first things you're stumbling in on. We have a hardcore series, 2 episodes a week. We have an escape series, which is a solo standard playthrough account where we just run through and basically try to get the quest done, get our hideout upgraded. So if you're looking for either genre of that or both, Those are on the channel. And then every week we do at least one, if not more, episodes of some stream highlights, some fun, raids that we have, or some other informative information. And we have a ton of playlists as well. So if you're looking for any kind of guides, some help with certain tasks, things like that, we can certainly, we have some playlists that you can go check out on the channel as well. But thank you, like, comment, subscribe. Really do appreciate it. These videos especially, I love your comments on. I love to have a discussion here. If you also want to spend some time and chat with us, you can do that live over on Twitch. Fridays and Saturdays, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. That link is in the description, as well as our Discord, which you can hit us up on, or our Twitter, which we just try to keep you up to date, at least with the Tarkov news or things that we find pretty interesting. So feel free to give us a follow over on our socials, but we love to chat with you. And like I said, especially for these, I love to hear your feedback on kind of the comments and what you're hearing, and some of my thoughts as well as some of yours. So please feel free to throw those down below, or like I said, join our Discord, give us a chat up over there. We'd love to have you. With that, we'll close it out. I am Doc. We are the Average Gamer Guys. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next Talking Tarkov video. Peace.